course, dogs were not revered as we would think today. So a living dog, is better than a dead lion. And then verses 5 and 6, the dead know of nothing that is happening under the sun. How would that contradict what we hear in society today?
They're looking down on us from heaven and they're happy for us or they're sad for us. Right.
Grandma is, seeing you graduate. Grandma sees you get married if she's passed and that kind of thing. It would seem that those who are dead are just, obviously they're oblivious as to what's going on here. But we have the story of the rich man and Lazarus. And it's interesting to me that Lazarus never says anything. There is a conversation between the rich man and Abraham. You have other occasions where you have Samuel who's brought back somehow, some way, and he has a conversation. But where is he? It doesn't say where he's coming from, and I don't know how to ask this without giving up the answer. But he's in some peace. He's in some kind of rest, you might say. Why have you disturbed me? And so it is interesting when you dive into what is in the afterlife, because we're only given just smidgens and hither and yon and so on. But according to Ecclesiastes here, there's just no reckoning. No, they do not know what's going on. Any comments about that? Tim?
Yeah, I think it's hard to make certain statements about exactly what people know or don't know. I don't know. I think there's a lot that when you look at those stories, and like you said, the rich man and Lazarus, and that's a parable. So how much of that is intended to tell us exactly? But even this is wisdom literature. I don't know that this is necessarily
verbatim
tell us exactly that people don't know. I think it's very difficult to make certain statements about exactly what people in the afterlife, what they're doing or where they are or exactly what's happening. It's just difficult to be certain about that.
Right. Gene?
I thought about Moses and Elijah as well.
Right.
The Mount of Transfiguration
right.
of Jesus. And that one kind of throws another thought into it. That might have been a very special, specific situation.
Right.
In which God wanted those men there because they had been so important in getting to the moment. So they were discussing with Jesus what was about to happen.
Right.
So,
yeah, is it symbolic based upon those two men specifically, whether it represents the law and the prophets in that sense? Right. Right. Did the apostles recognize them, or at least, Peter, James, and John that are there, Peter responds, or were they introduced? And, will we recognize people and, that kind of thing? But we cannot keep on going on this subject. I'm so sorry. That's the reason I paused a while ago. Do I even start this? So sorry, but we're going to have to move on. So in verses 7 through 10, live joyfully, and whatever your hand finds to do, do it with your might. For there is no work or device or knowledge or wisdom in the grave where you are going. So no work, device, knowledge, wisdom. Elaborating on this, again, this concept of beyond this life in the grave. What is happening that's not under the sun, as depicted quite often in Ecclesiastes. So God's providence rules overall. In verses 11 through 12, we'll notice in verse 11, I returned and saw under the sun that the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, nor bread to the wise, nor riches to men of understanding, nor favor to men of skill, but time and chance happen to them all. What do you derive from this? What do we learn by this kind of statement?
Good, bad,
Okay, good and bad happens to everyone. Tom?
The exceptions are the exceptions.
Okay, right. What else have we learned as we're going through Ecclesiastes about tomorrow? Tom?
Let's only worry about today. Enjoy where you're at today.
Right.
Give honor to God today, because that's all we have, really.
Right.
We can't go back and change anything in the past, and we can't do anything about tomorrow, because it's
Right.
not here. So enjoy your life as it is, be content, and be in moderation.
Right, right. And the tomorrow is completely unpredictable, right? So we just have no idea what tomorrow brings. And so it's many examples we could find in the Bible, but we'll have to continue. Wisdom may be better than strength, but may soon be forgotten also. I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself. I'm making that statement that's going to apply for verses 13 through 18. I would say in verse 12 that death sneaks up on us all. How many of you have plans tomorrow? Not very many of you. Uh-oh. I hope you have plans tomorrow. I hope you have something, a purpose. You have something to do. Not just sit around and go, but the thing is that one day your plans will be foiled, right? My plans will be foiled. There will be no tomorrow. There will be no next week. There will be no whatever it is that lies in the future. And so, typo, I hope not. No, I fixed it on the screen, on the slide. Okay, it's not fixed in not my notes. So, the poor wise man. I wonder why he has the poor. I can understand the wise man, but what do you think the reasoning behind poor? Tom?
Well, I've seen this happen too, is that you have somebody that doesn't have status. And
Right.
That's what he means by the poor white man. Is that someone doesn't have status, they don't listen to him.
Because someone's rich, we oftentimes equate that they must be smart, or
Yeah. So even though the poor wise man, he'll have the wisdom, and he'll have the results and everything, but he won't be remembered because he wasn't the rich man. So
Right.
he'll have the results and he'll accomplish things, but they won't remember him because he wasn't the rich man.
Right.
He wasn't the man with status.
Right, Tom? Same thing. Okay, so the poor wise man saves the city, but is not remembered. So the conclusion is that wisdom is better than strength. Nevertheless, the poor man's wisdom is despised, and his words are not heard. Words of the wise spoken quietly should be heard rather than the shout of a ruler of fools. Wisdom is better than weapons of war, but one sinner destroys much good. So that last statement just really kind of changes everything. The paradigm shifts, and so all the good of the wise can be foiled by how many sinners?
One.
By one sinner. It doesn't take much to throw a monkey wrench, right? A monkey wrench into everything. And so wisdom may be better than strength, but it may soon also be forgotten. So in chapter 10, verses 1 through 3, a little folly spoils the wise man's reputation. So kind of keeping on a course, there's no chapter breaks or verse breaks in this book, in Ecclesiastes. So you kind of wonder sometimes as you're reading through why these don't go hand in hand, or why there's that break. So we learned in chapter 10, verses 4 through 7, that opposites can prevail, and that danger lurks around every corner, in verses 8 through 11. Notice in verse 10, work smart, not hard, is how I've titled it. Give me 6 hours to chop a tree, And what did Abraham Lincoln say he was going to do? You give me 6 hours to chop the tree.
He's gonna spend the first 5 sharpening the axe.
All right, yeah. The one I found it said 4 hours. So if he's got 6 hours, he's going to spend 4 hours sharpening the axe. Why would you do that? Okay, do the work. So, what's one of our slogans you might say, or something that we would say? Work.
Work harder, and work smarter, not harder.
Work. Sydney's got it backwards. Yeah. Work smart, not hard, right? Now, sometimes we just want to get it done, and we just, especially us guys, we're just going to, rough through it, when we probably could stop and spend a little bit more time in figuring out how to do this the most efficient way, but who has time for that, right? Thomas?
I'm a work smarter, not harder part. Yes, that's a good practice because it does save burnout. But when it comes to working a job, especially depending on the type of job, there is no work smarter. You work harder and nothing happens. You work harder and you burn yourself out. I've experienced that. It's because after driving the truck, I was working smart. I was working myself, but eventually it caught up. I had to start working hard.
Well, work is hard, right?
Yeah,
Whether you're using your brain or you're using your
The
brawn.
point I'm getting is that work smart is the best way to do it, but sometimes it don't always work.
Sometimes you just got to get in there and get her done, right? The follies of the fool, verses 12 through 15. And so in verse 12, his words swallow him up. In verse 13, the end of his words are folly. In verse 14, the fool has many words as if he knows what will come to be. He's a lot of talk. In verse 15, a fool can't accomplish the most simple deeds. So how would you describe the folly of the fools as we've just read? How in your own words? I put it in my words. What are your words? Okay, he's quick to speak. What else? The person that's got it all figured out, you can't tell them otherwise.
And he never answers questions.
Never ask a question.
Never trying to find, figure out what questions to ask and look for the answers,
Right. And so we'll have a think tank. The board of directors get around and they just, what we might call, work it out. And you want input from everybody. I have an uncle, he's passed now, had multiple degrees, worked up the corporate ladder. Multimillionaire, at least we suppose, based upon where he was and the kind of companies that he ran and so on. And they were going through one of the factories, and he pointed over at a guy, and he was telling some of his engineers and so on that were also the high ups. And he was president of like 15 companies over that were just under a larger umbrella. He traveled all worldwide, all over the world, all the time. He's a major bigwig, and he tells this guy, or says to these engineering, what do you call them? Executives and so on. Thank you, Tom. Don't mess with this guy. If he's ever over in the corner and just sitting there, leave him alone. Because he had come up with numerous things that would improve production. It looks like he's just taking it easy and he's slacking, but he wasn't. He's thinking, how can we improve? And he had saved the corporations just hundreds of thousands of dollars. But he was just a peon. He's just a broom pusher, probably a little bit higher than that, but he's just a worker. So we can learn from everyone, can't we? We can learn from our children, our grandchildren. We can learn from those that you wouldn't think would have a clue. They might be able to pinpoint things that will help us along life's road. So, sorry I didn't click through all those. Let's see. Woe to the lazy glutton, on the other hand, in verses 16 and 19. And then we learn in verse 20, do not curse others or you will be found out. Has that happened to anyone? Anyone? That might be more prominent in the workforce. You say something to a coworker, and next thing you know, the boss is saying, hey, come on in. We're going to have to sit down and have a little talk. I understand you're not very happy about that kind of thing. You think that people could keep things to themselves, that you could talk to them in confidence. This is probably not the best time to tell you this, but if you come to me and we sit down, Dolly will not even know about it. I have things that people have talked to me in counseling and so on in their past life and what they've done that just shocked me. I had no idea, no clue what was going on in their lives at that time or previous and so on, and I'll take it to my grave. But not everyone does that, do they? What contradicts that kind of confidentiality amongst people? Gossip, envy, pride. Those can creep in. It's that the bones in the closet type thing, that little juicy whatever and so on. It cannot go beyond. If someone is sitting down in confidence and telling you whatever it is, it needs to stay right there. And sometimes that happens in the family. There's been times that I've let the cat out of the bag, but I didn't realize it. I didn't know that it was supposed to be kept, a surprise, not some whatever bad thing, but whatever the case may be. It can be very superficial, but for that other person, it may be very, very important that it go no further. And you talk about breaking that kind of confidence and trust that another has in you. And there are things because people talk that you hear and you go, hey, I understand you said such and such, and let's talk about that. And you can just see their jaw drop, right? And so, do not curse others, or you will be found out there in verse 20. Going on to chapter 11, and talking about charitable deeds, verses 1 through 6. What is your explanation here in verse 1? Cast your bread upon the waters, for you will find it after many days. So that's a New King James reading. Because the first thing I think, especially as a child and even still today, I know what it means now, but you think bread, it's just going to dissolve and, but it's not talking about bread, right? What's it talking about? What's another word that we could use, in fact, Karen? We'll definitely get to that, right? Right? Cindy?
You get what you get.
Okay, what comes around goes around type thing. Okay. Tom?
The generality for be a generous person.
Right.
Be a generous person. And don't be stingy with what you have. If you see somebody in need, be generous.
Right.
And help people out.
Yeah, what's the circle? Where does it begin? We oftentimes don't begin here. We begin with us giving and therefore getting something in return. But where does it really, really, really begin? What's the backbone of it, the crux?
Everything comes to God.
Right. So I've been given this by God. Doesn't matter how hard you work for it and so on. I know that you earned that paycheck, but that was God giving you the ability, the resources, and so on, right? The talent. God initially gives us that, and so if we go and give, then what's going to be the return? Blessing from God. It may not be monetary. I don't know whether it will be or not. I'm certainly not standing up here, and I'm not a prosperity preacher by any means. My point, though, is that in order to reap a harvest, even sound like one, you have to do what? You have to sow the seed. You got to plant. And so you got to take this seed that you really could do what with? What could you do with wheat seed, for example? You could eat it. You turn it into bread. But you could take that seed and do what? Now, yeah, you can plant it and it grow and it produces more. That's the whole idea of you sow one seed and what? You get more back, right? Mississippi, they can keep their soil. All we had was clay. We brought dirt in, supposedly. It was just more clay and rock even. But anyways, we went ahead and we planted potatoes. It was the first time ever that we planted potatoes and got fewer. In other words, it rotted in the ground rather than getting more. But typically, for every potato that we would plant, we would get 10 to 15 potatoes out of the one potato seed. You don't plant one kernel of corn and it grows into a big old gigantic kernel. And if it did that, great. At least you can cut it up and you divide it and you got something to feed more than just yourself one kernel of corn. But the whole idea is that you plant one thing and you get a multiple from it. So God gives us a talent and ability, and we turn around and we multiply that, right? What's the parable? The parable of the sower, the parable of the talents, the parable of the minas. And so that's what's being expressed here. It seems as though you're wasting it. You're throwing that bread on the water, but in truth, you're going to get something in return. And it will come back to you. So give without the expectation of return. You shouldn't say no. Luke chapter 6 and verse 35. But love your enemies, do good, and lend, hoping for nothing in return, Jesus says. And your reward will be great, and you will be sons of the Most High. For he is kind to the unthankful and evil. So God blesses all. We pointed this out. We see that in the Sermon on the Mount. And so our responsibility is to give, to have that giving spirit. Notice in chapter 6 of Matthew, verses 3 and 4, when you do a charitable deed, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. What does he mean by that? Keep quiet. Don't tell anyone. No one else needs to know. No one. That your charitable deed may be in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will himself reward you openly. So in verse 2 of our context, give beyond your ability. Are you giving beyond your ability? So we've already talked about this. Do people have more month than they have money? Do y'all know that phrase? That you have more money? Is that how you say it? It doesn't seem right. You have more month than money. Anyways, the idea is that you're not able to pay all your bills. And so we have that big mortgage. We have our 2 new car payments. We have the insurance. We have our food bill. We're going out to eat. We're buying $5 coffees and we're putting that on a what? Credit card. Oh boy, that piece of plastic. That sure is easy to use. And so we've got more month than we do money to pay for the bills is the idea. What if we flip that and we're giving that money to help others, and that's what puts us in debt? If we look at our debt, where did that money go? Tom?
Wherever we chose to put it.
That's right, wherever we chose to put it. And is it on us? Under most circumstances, it is. It is. And notice the Macedonians, though, in 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verses 1 through 6. Let's turn over there. 2 Corinthians chapter 8. Beginning in verse 1. Moreover, brethren, we make known to you the grace of God bestowed upon the churches of Macedonia, that in a great trial of affliction, the abundance of their joy and their deep poverty abounded in the riches of their liberality. So you don't typically think of deep poverty associated with those who are going to be very liberal with their money. For I bear witness that according to their ability, yes, and beyond their ability, they were freely willing. And as was pointed out by Lamarck, I think Wednesday, it's not always monetarily, right? It's not always money. It could be our resources and abilities, the talents. Verse 4, imploring us with much urgency that we would receive the gift and the fellowship of the ministering to the saints. And this they did, not as we had hoped, but first they gave themselves to the Lord, and then to us by the will of God. So we urge Titus that as he had begun, so he would also complete this grace in you as well. So keying in on verse 5, what did they put first? They put first God. If we're not putting God first when it comes to our money, who are we putting first? And I'm not the judge, but I wonder how many Christians, good intending Christians, faithful otherwise, but not good stewards of their money, will go to hell because of selfishness. Me, spending it on myself and not putting God first, giving him the leftovers. Would we be the first to do that? No. God's people did that long before us. So it's a danger that we need to be careful about and have our guard up to our own false intentions. And again, that idea of keeping up with the Joneses and so on. So may Macedonia be a good example for us to follow, that even in our deep poverty, we give liberally to those around us. In verse 3, if the clouds are full of rain, they empty themselves upon the earth. And if a tree falls to the south or the north, and the place where the tree falls, there it shall lie. What does he mean by this? Where do those blessings first come from? From God. So the rain clouds are for our benefit. Where the tree falls, there it stays, just as when man dies, there is no return. I think there's a combination, especially getting into chapter 12. Again, we have a chapter break here, but I think he's kind of leading up to it. I mean, everyone knows that a tree falls, or where the tree falls, there it lies. Now, we don't know whether it really makes a sound or not. I don't think it does, because there's no one there to hear it. Okay, I was just seeing if you're paying attention or not. So, what has he been pointing out when it comes to money and so on? Well, what has the preacher been pointing out all this time going through Ecclesiastes? Stewardship. What else? You can't take it with you. You cannot take it with you. Once you're dead, you're dead. Once that tree falls, that's it. Before the tree falls, where do the blessings come from? From where? From whom do the blessings come? We're showered by God with blessings. And so in verses 4 through 6, always be ready to give to others. It is God's working through you to bring this blessing about. Be ready in the morning and evening, never withholding that which is good towards others. You're always ready to give. And there's nothing, 1 Corinthians 16 and so on. There are many passages about giving, but oftentimes we associate this plate, as I use it as a prop. When this is passed around, how faithful are you to fill it up first of the week, your first fruits to God? But then, is it possible as the week goes by, we use the analogy or we think to ourselves, I gave at the office. And therefore, we don't have any more to give. Or is it possible that you have put God first? He comes before every bill. Before your electric bill, your water and your electric is going to be cut off before you ever shortchange God, in other words. But then as the week goes by and you see opportunities, you're still going to give. And we talked about this not too long ago. What is sacrifice? What's part of sacrifice? The act of sacrifice? Denying yourself? It costs. It hurts. And for someone who's raised many different kinds of livestock in his life, what do you not ever give up? Your best. You do not do that. That is completely contrary to any logic for someone who raises animals. You do not give up your best. Now, I have, after I've used them all up. For example, we used to have a rabbitry, and so we sold little baby kits, 5 weeks old, for $50 each. Could have probably asked more, believe it or not, because these little kids, and it's just, supply and demand. We would sell over 200 of those a year, and we probably could have doubled that if we had the capacity. I had a barn that Dolly would complain is, those rabbits have it cooler in the barn than we have in our own house, okay? But anyways, the point is that I would use a doe, and the doe's going to throw off ideally 6 to 8 because of the size and so on. I know this is more information than you ever care to know. But anyways, the point is that when they get down to only throwing, having in a litter 2 or 3, they go away. Some people will just keep them in their barn because they don't want anyone else to have that champion livestock. And we had grand champions, quite a few grand champions that came out of our barn. But I was of the, when I start seeing that dwindle, I want to pass that on because I've got their offspring. But boy, we can hold on to things, right? But you don't give up your best unless you're forced or you just, you don't have any use for it anymore is the idea. If we treat God that way, what is our spiritual condition before Him? What does He think about that?
Young to old. What can we do? Can we see that?
You sung that. So we need to live well, but with judgment in mind. Again, we're givers, but we can enjoy today. We work hard, and we can enjoy the fruit of our labor. But ultimately, one day, the bell will ring. Verses 7 and 8, it is good to enjoy the good times, but know that there will be dark days to come, at least for some. Not everyone lives to be old. Be joyful in all the days, whether they are good or bad. In verses 9 and 10, have fun in your youth, but know that you will give a reckoning. Eventually, you will need to put away evil and grow up, you might say. Your youth cannot be your excuse. And it shouldn't be because we never know how long we're going to live. How many of you know of people who have died in their 40s? My dad died at 49. How about 30s? You know anyone that died in their 30s? How about 20s? How about teens? It doesn't always wake us up. A friend of mine, Corey, got stomach cancer when he was 17. I was 17 also. We were the same age. The last time I saw him, he was at a Sonic on the cool side. And he had half his Coke and half his Jack Daniels. And I wasn't living right. And it just breaks my heart that I wasn't in the right place in my life to say, hey, you need to know Jesus. And he died when he was 17 years old. And we can go down to, our daughter just had a miscarriage. And, not even born, right? We just don't know. Don't waste your youth playing with the devil. And then some passages that are often read at funerals. Remember your Creator long before old age sets in. Verses 1 through 7, we'll emphasize these. In verse 1, have an appreciation for God at a young age so that you will not be bitter in the latter days. In verse 2, eyesight is lost, and after the storms of life are gone, difficult times still remain. They don't go away. And I think that that's what he's referring to, that it's still cloudy, right? And so in verse 3, old age, one is cold, weak, and very few are around. It's amazing when you go and visit someone in the nursing home or who is elderly, they don't get very many visits. And you just see them light up. When in your youth, you got your buddies and so on, and you can go and you get together and you go doing this and that, and in the older age, a lot of times they can't. They're not that mobile, and you even see it within the family that the grandchildren reach a certain age, maybe about 10 or so, it starts waning, that they go and see grandma. They've got their lives. They're doing this and they're doing that, and so you don't have that time spent that you normally, or that you did in your younger years. In verse 4, the aged go to bed, that should be, go to, let's see, I'm behind. They go to bed early, are hard of hearing, yet rise at the sound of the bird early in the morning. It doesn't take much to wake them up, and now they're awake. So in verse 5, those latter in their years, there is a constant fall risk, vulnerable to threats. The hair turns white. Let's see. That's used as the almond tree blossoms. Almond flowers are white. And so the grasshopper represents that the littlest of things become a burden. Do you have a different translation there in verse 5? The grasshopper is a burden. I believe one translation is like he
drags himself.
Yes, yeah, drags himself along. You're using a walker, that's the realistic part. And so it goes on to say that the drive, the vitality, the aspirations, the zeal for life have fled away, in my own words. In verse 6, the cord holding the lamp is often made of silk and silver, interwoven and hung in the east corner of the house, commentators say. So as with all things, their failure is inevitable. The rope breaks. Nothing lasts forever. And then in verse 7, the body turns back to dust and the spirit returns to God. So very descriptive there of those who have failing health. Their body is deteriorating. And in a sense, they are dying that long-term death. And whether it's the hearing or the eyesight, the association with others, it's amazing that someone young, when they pass, there's a huge crowd, but it seems like the older that person is, especially aged, the smaller the turnout. And, it's because they don't have very many friends. They've died. If they live long enough, and so on. So the preacher's care for his son is to learn what is needed to be wise. Verses 8 through 12. In verse 8, vanity of vanities, says the preacher, all is vanity. Verses 9 and 10, the preacher shared his understanding and wants to prepare the son. The words of the wise are like goads. The words of scholars are like well-driven nails given by one shepherd. And maybe in your translation that shepherd is capitalized. Man does that. It's not in everything is a capitalization in Hebrew. But why is the wise are like goads? The words of the wise, that is, are like goads. Gene?
It's meant to get you to do something.
Prod you, poke you, right, right,
A wise person is going to try to help you over time.
right. Okay. And so then it says the words of scholars are like well-driven nails. And I immediately think, that's the last nail in the coffin type thing. I mean, that seals the deal. In verse 12, the making of books, there is no end. May this be sufficient for your success, seems to be the thought. So the conclusion of the whole matter, of course, is let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is man's all. This is it. It's everything. Maybe recently you might have saw a post like this on Facebook, that your career and your cars and your house and your jewelry and your tools and your this and your that. In fact, what really kind of stuck out to me is that idea that the tools that you wouldn't let anyone else touch, now is going to go to a stranger. I mean, all hands on. And you can't stop it. Well, I didn't have time to finish this. Verse 14, for God will bring every work into judgment, including every secret thing. Reminds us of Hebrews chapter 4, 11 and 12, I believe, maybe 12 and 13, whether good or evil. And so finally, the cure, the prescription, the treatment, the antidote, the therapy for foolishness ending in vanity is fear God and keep his commandments. May we do so. Thank you.